Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Oh, look at that. It's my favorite flavor. Squashed. Oh, well. There is a rabbinic phrase. It comes from Pirkei Avot, from the ethics of our ancestors. And it says, Ezihu Chacham. Who is a person who is wise? Hamamed Mikol Adam, the person who can learn from all people. Well, I am not wise, but the drash, the words that I wish to share with you this morning, I've learned from at least 3. And therefore, I want to acknowledge them and share with you that if there is anything that is helpful in the words that I'm going to say, if you take away anything from them, the credit really goes to these 3. The first 2 are actually 2 study groups that I am fortunate in which to participate. One is our Torah on Tuesday class that meets at 12 o'clock on Tuesdays. And this past week, the class and the discussion that we had was particularly engaging and enlightening, as it often is, but on this one particular issue, so very helpfully so. And the other study group is a Thursday study group that I have with 5 other colleagues of mine. We gather each week to study together for 2 hours, both with one another and also with a teacher of ours who we Skype in, believe it or not, from Philadelphia. On a weekly basis we gather. And the words that I share were enhanced by my conversations with them and their input and their wisdom as well. And the third person whose insight I share with you that really makes up the core of this drasha is my mother, Minna Bernhard. For she once shared with me a story and a lesson that I have kept and held on to for many, many years. It was a story that she shared with me at the beginning of my rabbinate and is one that I have found profoundly useful. And I also find it all the more interesting then that her wisdom is reflected in this week's Torah portion. And ultimately what I'm hoping is that in sharing with you this wisdom, this teaching, this Torah, I want to be able to focus on one small dynamic that gives us insight into who we are and how we act within this world, and to teach us how to be better people. So here is the story that my mother shared with me a number of years ago, as I said, pretty early on in my rabbinate. Little under 40 years ago, my family picked up and moved from Great Neck, Long Island to London, England. And there we lived for about 7 years. Early on in that move, fairly soon after we got to London, one of my 2 older sisters, the younger of the 2, Ivy, was diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease. This was in the mid-70s. And at this point in time, the treatments for Hodgkin's were not nearly as sophisticated as they have since become. Now, I will tell you right now, my sister survived the treatment and has gone on to be, along with my other sister, just 2 of the more just wonderful women within my life. But it was tough when she was first diagnosed. It was very hard for my family. Here we were in a new country. Here we were without the support system of family and friends that my family had built up when they had lived in New York, in Long Island, and in Great Neck. There they were essentially alone. And so my mother called her mother, and she said, "Mom, I need you to come." And to her credit, my grandmother got on a plane and came. And when she got off the plane, the way my mother tells the story, she immediately started saying to her, "You know what? I need to take you to Harrods. I need to take you to Harrods. Come on. You know, I see that you're struggling. Here, let me get you something. Come on, let's go to Harrods and I'll buy you something." And she went on like this, on and on and on, until my mother finally relented and said, "Fine." And they went to Harrods. And my grandmother stopped talking about going to Harrods for the rest of her time there. And my mother, when she reflected upon this with me, noted that on the surface, what her mother was doing was very nice, both in coming, but also in getting there and wanting to do something for her, right? Couldn't fault her for that, and I will tell you that my grandmother, impeccable taste. Quite honestly, if you had a grandmother like that grandmother and she offers to take you to Harrods, you say yes. But as my mother went on to point out to me, that even though here my grandmother was coming and doing this good thing, it wasn't really a good thing for my mother. And coming to do this and insisting, come, I want to get you something, beautiful, you need something. That wasn't helpful to my mother. What my mother really needed at that moment was for her mother to just be there, to be present. But it was so hard for my grandmother. It was so difficult for her. She had to find something that she could do in order to make who feel better? Herself feel better. And so here we have this odd situation where on the surface my grandmother is doing this wonderful thing. She's coming to be with her daughter. And she's offering to take her out to this very expensive store and buy her this very expensive sweater or tchotchke, whatever it is they ended up getting. But as good as all of that looks on the surface, beneath the surface it is thoroughly unhelpful. Because it's not what my mother, who is the person in need at that moment, required. It's not what my mother, that person to whom my grandmother was obligated to serve at that moment, needed. She came and did a good deed, but in a sense, she did the good deed and helped herself. We see a similar dynamic in this week's Torah portion. In this week's Torah portion, the beginning of the Torah portion, after wrestling with an angel, after being renamed Yisrael, Jacob is now ready to meet his brother, from whom he fled 20 years ago. And on the surface, it looks like Jacob is just being so lovely. The brothers meet, they embrace, they weep, they hug, they cry. And Jacob will say to his brother, and we have it here in chapter 33, he'll say to his brother, Esau will say to Jacob, what is the meaning of all this? What are the meaning of all these gifts? And Jacob will say to him here, I want to present you with my minchati, with this gift. Right? He wants to do something nice to and for his brother. And Esau says, no, seriously, I have enough. To which Jacob comes, no, please accept this gift. I have plenty. And Jacob had to urge Esau until finally Esau accepted the gift. Finally he relented. Now again, on the surface, it looks like Jacob is being this really nice guy. He's coming back. He's doing this mitzvah. He's coming to present a gift to his brother. Maybe he even means it in terms of making up for what it is that he stole. And so he wants to do this good thing, this good deed. But what does Esau need? Does he need the gift? No. He has plenty. What Esau needs, what Esau wants, is his brother. He wants to be with his brother. He wants to live with his brother. He wants to reunite with his brother. He even says, come, you'll live with me. And Jacob, by the way, will say, oh, sure, well, listen, you go ahead. Oh, no, come on, we'll go at the same pace, says Esau. No, you go ahead. The women and the children in the flock, if I push them too hard, they'll die. And Esau says, well, let me leave some men to protect you. And Jacob says, no, it's totally not necessary. You go on ahead, and I'll go be with you. I'll catch up to you. And then this section of the Torah ends with Jacob going off to Shechem and building a house, the Torah says, and establishing pens for the animals, thereby indicating he had no intention whatsoever to reconcile with his brother. So here we have it on the surface. Jacob being nice, Jacob being good, Jacob doing something seemingly right, giving this gift. But really beneath the surface, that's not what's going on here. Esau doesn't need the gift. Esau needs a brother. Esau wants his brother. And so Jacob is going through these motions and presenting to him something that makes who feel better? Makes Jacob feel better, not Esau. And so all that unfolds in chapter 33, all that unfolds within this reunion, we suspect, has to do with Jacob feeling and doing what he thinks he needs to do in order to feel good. It's very similar to my grandmother. And very similar to me. and to, I suspect, many of us. For this is when my mother told me the story of her mother coming to London. When I was talking with her about my work here and how part of my work was visiting with people and calling people and checking on them. And the conversation unfolded with my mother such that she pointed out to me how I was being like her mother when she came to London by the way that I called people. And how so? Because often, when I was first starting out as a rabbi, I'd call someone to check on them, see how they're doing, and I would say to them, call us if you need anything. Now, on the surface, am I being nice? Sure. On the surface, I am being nice. And on the surface, so are all of you when you call a friend or someone in need and you say that. Call me if I need anything. But in reality, is that a nice thing to do to them? Not really. Because in saying, call me if you need anything, who's on the hook now? Not me. I'm off the hook. I hang up the phone and I can say to myself, wow, what a good person I am. I called them. Yay me. I feel good about myself. But all I've done is put the burden on them. I make it now their responsibility to figure out what they need and then for them to call me. Just like Jacob, just like my grandmother, I do the same, or I did the same, until my mother taught me otherwise. And we all do this. We all engage in reaching out to people in need, but we do so in a way at times that make us feel better because we've done something, but we don't really make ourselves available to them. When we call someone who is ill, we should do more than just say, call me if you need anything, though that's a fine way to begin a conversation. But we also should say, do you need anything? And not only that, if you want to push it a little bit further, we could say, you know something? Can I help you with? And then list the things that we are willing to help. Can I help you with a ride to the doctor's? Can I help you? Can I bring over a meal for you? Can I help you? Can I sit with you while you're going through this treatment? It's not enough to just say, do you need anything? We need to put ourselves out there. Because otherwise, at the end of the day, we're just making ourselves feel better and not really being of use. It is somewhat akin to when we go to someone whom we've hurt and we've said, I'm sorry. I'm sorry can be among the most manipulative words ever uttered by any human being. Because when you say, I am sorry to someone, what is the common accepted response? That's okay. Right? When we say, I'm sorry, we are in fact looking for that person to say, that's okay. Why? Because we want them to make us feel better. I'm sorry in the response, that's okay, does wonders for me, because now my conscience is clear. But what does it do for the person? Well, perhaps a lot, but perhaps very little as well. My friends, at the end of the day, we have to be very careful when we do good deeds. We are very quick to let ourselves off the hook. We're very quick to go through the motions to try to put ourselves out there where really what we're doing is often shifting the burden to the other. And we have to be better than that. We have to challenge ourselves to truly put ourselves out for the person and not do the deeds that we do to make ourselves feel better, but to make sure that when we engage with someone in need, we make them feel better and never put the burden back onto them, because our job is to help lighten their burden. I began my words this morning by saying, Ezehu Chacham, Who is a wise person? I will conclude with this. Ezehu mensch. Who is a mensch? Someone who listens to their mother. Especially when your mother might be just as wise as my own, who taught me that doing a good deed requires that I think about the other, that I focus on the other, and that I do all that I can to be of service to the other and not myself. That is a mensch. Thanks, Mom. Shabbat Shalom.